Hello, and thank you so much for having me. It's quite the privilege to be among this group. I am going to take you on a journey that's somewhat different. Someone talked about going upstream, and I'm going to bring you as far upstream as we can, all the way to prenatal, and see if we can't see some similarities between how we can prevent serious illnesses by addressing complex medical, but before that, looking at some strategies to build community and reduce some of the risk factors and to reduce the trauma that we know from lots of research now. The ACE study's been around for a while. We know our work can hopefully put many of you all out of business, which obviously we're never going to accomplish. So Whole Kids is a faith-based organization which kind of happened after we started working and saw, wow, there seems to be something else in motion here. And we're in rural southeast Missouri. I spent some time in Sierra Leone before I started Whole Kids and worked with a nurse there from Ireland, and she saw, I don't know, 600 families a day that came through. And I held a baby whose mom had first had to convince her husband to let her take the baby out of the bush and walked for 3 days. And the baby died of measles. And I went, whoa, this is silly. This is preventable. But so I took that experience, and then I worked in the PICU at Children's Hospital in St. Louis. Just cutting edge, amazing. And then I was sent to southern Missouri and went, looks a little bit more like Sierra Leone than I'd like. So we actually started providing programs, and we do that through a combination of home visits and center-based programs. And I had just gotten a new logo, so you'll see it pop up a lot. So there we are. We're in southern Missouri. Missouri, I always say, is one big farm with 2 cities. And we are in the Missouri Ozarks. So it's hill country, and I used to spend a lot of time just going to float the rivers until I got down there and said, oh my gosh, all this beauty is really hiding a lot. So New Madrid's all the way over to the right, down by the Boot Hill, and we've started partnering with them because the state money says you have to pick up even more geographic area, so that gets a little impossible. So they're beautiful, and you will see social and geographic isolation there that is very similar to developing countries, and really is probably one of the biggest contributing factors to some of the poor outcomes that we have that are ending up causing serious illness. So as you can see, when you get back in those hills, there's a poverty that's different. When I first got down there, I was working at a domestic violence shelter to cover for one of our sisters who was going to study. And very typical of women religious, they said, oh, yeah, you're a peds nurse. Go see sick babies. Where are they? And how do I find them? And so I got back in those hills, and I found them. And they were certainly very isolated and very poor. And I thought I was just in a different part of Missouri, and took a long time for me to understand I was in a different culture. Okay, so I know you can't see these stats, but it is a heat map that would show you what we see in Missouri, which is all the way to the right. There's the stats. And then the counties we serve, those are stats that the dark red is 200% higher, and then the medium is 50% higher, and just a higher rate. So we're looking at some of the prenatal health indices. We're looking at children in poverty. We're looking at children who have had substantiated child abuse and neglect. And then we look at those health outcomes that are being attached to this. Okay, we know protective factors need to be in place, and there's 5 of those that include actual concrete supports and teaching parents about child development and increasing the social and emotional development of children to reduce some of those things that we know are going to probably cause poor health outcomes, and to get them to a place where they're not going to be able to tolerate some of the problems that do cause serious illness. Okay? So here's one of our biggest problems. So you can see Whole Kids, and this is the region that would include pediatric specialists. We have some pediatricians and family nurse practitioners. But once we have a child with some complex medical problems or a serious illness, we're in trouble, because you can see we have a high rate of poverty. The families that we see For a family of four, the average income is about $13,000 a year. So to get up to Cardinal Glennon or Children's or Mercy, it's about 130 miles one way. So probably don't have a vehicle and certainly don't have fuel. You may have access to Medicaid transport, but you have to have minutes on your phone because it takes about a half hour for them to answer, and they won't let you bring your siblings, the child's siblings. So now you've got to get health care, and it's going to be a very, very long ride. So you can see over in Cape, towards the right, I don't know if I have a thing, that's 130 miles, over to Springfield, 160, and over to Kansas City, 310. So what we have learned to do is to take some of those evidence-based programs and start home visiting programs very early. It helps us to not only teach, but it also gives us a way to start identifying some of the problems. So Healthy Families America is a trauma-informed parent education program by which we can really say, these are the things that help to create a healthy brain. This is when to call a doc. This is how we can learn some alternate ways to promote positive behavior so you're not spanking so quickly. Okay? Maybe that's the best we can do. Try and find some strengths, build on those strengths, and so when those babies, if they get sick, if any family member gets sick, they're already starting to learn, I can go from my strengths. I am resilient. So often my staff will come home and say, nope, no strengths. I said, well, are they dead? No, they're not dead. There's something, let's go find it, ask them. And then we have a nursing program, which again, more of our medically fragile babies are being seen by our nurses. And we just picked up a contract for the Parents as Teachers program. So 2 evidence-based programs, a promising approach, and to see if we can't try to get these moms ready, and then you'll see the children in the community development. This was a mom late in her pregnancy that was completely surprised that that baby was coming out of that size pelvis. So you can see, well, babies, but you saw the houses. So if we're going to broaden the classic look of prevention services, we need to teach parents the value of education, not just get an education, but how do you value it? So many parents will say, how'd your mom get you to go to college? I said, well, high school completion was non-negotiable. College, you had to try. And masters and PhDs were celebrated. You have that power. So the value of education. So this broadens it a little bit more. Teaching parents to teach their children by modeling that they should be contributing. We're starting to build up the person who hopefully is going to be the shaper of the culture in that family system. And then, obviously, increasing health literacy. You can't walk into the beautiful Children's Hospital in St. Louis if they can get there with their sick child and not be intimidated if you're from those hills, right? You saw the houses. So just the beauty of the place. So we need to teach them how to have the confidence and the language to be able to speak with their physicians, okay? And then employment skills, when you look back at the protective factors and the social determinants, we know that financial stress is huge, right? And it becomes much more of an issue to where we have that kick the cat syndrome is what we call it. I'll go with the male structure. Dad can't get a job, upsets mom, physically hurts mom. Mom has a huge stress in her life, hurts child. Child finally turns around and kicks cat. I don't know if it actually works like that, but there is a domino effect and a multi-generational effect. So how do we address those kids with complex medical needs? It's quite sad that we don't have a lot of options, but I'll give you some hope at the end. So one is to actually just have to move to get closer to services. So this is a little myelomeningocele baby. But we had been in there for a good while, and you can see by the picture at the bottom that she's not rich, and look at the bond, look at the baby. Okay, we're moving towards health, but it did become complicated. One of the things that we would typically have in there is we'd call First Steps, which is a 0 to 3 program that brings in nursing and OT and PT and speech, but their program was cut, and so those therapists didn't get paid for the travel time. So about an hour back and for each trip, they didn't get paid for 2 of the 3 hours. So we lost that. So there's a little bit more of a need to be creative to make things work. So one of the other things we do, these twins were born at 24 weeks, just gray, practically dead-looking kids, airlifted up to St. Louis. Then, obviously, you saw how far that it was. Once they came home after 3 months, they made the trip once, but then they were lost to follow-up, and they showed up in the ER at 9 months weighing 12 pounds and had not been followed up with. So you see chubby, good-looking babies. That was after they were pulled and put into a medical foster home. But then all the energy was moved to getting those kids back to their families and to teach. We're back to health literacy in communities. Okay? This was just a fun. I had this little fella as a preemie. He was, his mom was a cocaine addict, and he was removed and sent down to Missouri for some reason. Cricket, his mom on the right, had, I don't know, I think 108 foster kids and had adopted a bunch. So when I was called in, this is when I was doing home visits, and it was one of my first ones, and I'm sitting on the floor trying to figure out what in the world I'm supposed to be doing. And at the time, my baby scale had kind of a pen, just a circle with a long, and I turned around and my elbow hit that scale, and he went, bonk. And I thought, oh my God, what am I doing? I just threw the baby across. I did catch him. But Rashawn grew up as a big, strong boy, and right after that picture, Cricket died. And so he came back to Whole Kids, had been a part of our life for a long time, and said, Sister Ann, I need a job. And I knew this baby was hurt, really hurt. He wasn't a baby, he was huge. And I said, well, Rashawn, can you drive a tractor? No. Well, can you do a lawnmower? No. Can you move horses? No. I said, okay, you can have a job. We'll figure it out, because that was the right thing for that kid at the time. He's playing ball. He's almost finished college, and this was one of the babies that was in foster care with him, and he's adopting Annie at this point. So you see the transgenerational problems that we can see with poverty and trauma, and you can see the transgenerational solution, okay? This was one of my babes when I was back. She was her mom was a heroin addict, and I think she thought she had a puppy. She was feeding this baby a couple of times a day, and was airlifted out when she finally brought her into the pediatrician about 3 weeks later, because she had an AV canal that had not been diagnosed, because she left about 2 hours after delivery because she needed a fix. So I went in, and she was on methadone, and we really worked, and she got adopted. But this was one of our failures, and it was kind of frustrating. So Mom had a very significant cognitive delay. She had selective mutism at 6 after a family member murdered the husband, and it was as crazy as you could believe. It was her aunt who was at the coffee table every morning and hanging out, and then the aunt didn't like the husband or thought he was abusive, maybe he was, got the 15-year-old son to take him out to the woods and shoot him. A couple of days later, he wasn't dead, so they pulled him out and ran over him a couple of times. But this was all being talked about at the coffee table with Desert Rose, at the table, and nobody protecting that child's ears. So at 6, she was jumping on the bed. I think she was 4, and chipped her tooth, and it was just a trigger, and she didn't talk again for 6 years. She was pregnant at 15, and that little fella has some cognitive delay, has a new boyfriend. She's pregnant with that boyfriend. He really did abuse and beat this child terribly. She can't see it, even though he's under house arrest and admitted it, and she's pregnant again. So we saw the one with Marshawn, and now we see probably the more common. So here's our hope. This is what we do best. Increases parents' health literacy and the networking skills. We do have wonderful pediatricians. We do have some agencies out there that will support us, and our job as Whole Kids is to really find the network and then teach the moms and dads how to use that network. When we got started, we thought we'd call it Ripples, but that was after a couple of bottles of wine, and then we thought that was a good name, and it wasn't. But Whole Kids became even more difficult, because creating a whole child is much more difficult than dental sealants, right? And we probably should have not tried as hard of a mission, but it has been beautiful, and the experience has been lovely. So this little baby was born to parents that didn't know they were having a baby with Down syndrome or a heart defect, And this mom, this is the kind of strength. She went through the phone books, which are about 20 pages, and called every social agency that she could find. We start with W. She found us. We worked with her for many years. And she's done beautifully. That child's integrated into the family. She was going back for, I don't know, one more repair, I guess. But mom and dad learned to move forward in the health system and figured out ways to get back up to St. Louis when they needed to. The thing that we see most as far as truly working is the community response. And so this rural community will have benefits and sell pies, and they rally if there's a need. And so this is Briar, and he's got leukemia, and the people really are supporting him. The other thing we need to do is stay connected to universities outside the area to keep us cutting edge. And what that does is to really give them a means to do research in an area that's usually not very accessible to them, and funding opportunities for both, and getting some information disseminated out to the national level. And right now we're working on the the Healthy Families America program, typical, standardized with big metropolitan areas, doesn't work in rural Missouri. Parts of it don't, so they're going to help us to look at that. Real quick, we also have to create community. You saw the geographic isolation. So some of the ways that we do that is children to children create community differently. And then if you can grow that generation in a way that they know each other, that they're there to support each other, we start reducing, again, the effects of childhood trauma. So we have a lot of we have a beautiful center in Ellington to look at ways that we can pull these kids together and their parents. The community gatherings, again, decrease the social and geographic isolation. And, of course, everything has to be given free because they don't have a lot of money. But that's not the goal. We're never going to make any money. So youth volunteers, we bring them in from all over. Again, you expose them to beautiful children who have, this child has had, I think, 23 surgeries. She's been on and off hospice twice now. But you bring in kids and you make community happen, and then you've brought out another generation in to see. A ton with animals. They're very, very healing. We also know that where animal abuse exists, child abuse exists, but it's not really very safe to say, hey, you probably don't need to chain up your hunting dog because, I don't know, they do have guns out there. That's very insulting. So we just kind of model it. The leisure activity out there is run to the river. We lose at least 2 kids a year. So we teach them how to swim. And we know that formal swimming lessons actually increase school performance. Every way that we can create a whole child to reduce those effects of what we know in the ACE study: cardiovascular disease, mental illness, drug abuse and neglect, risky behavior. So the animal child, again, another way, we're trying to make a whole child. We look at the fact that there is family violence, and that's just one more way to traumatize a child. I'll kill your puppy, okay? And so we try to show our kids that there are other ways. The kids in the middle are giving back. Everything is relational. The horses worked with you all week. Let's give back. The child to the left was so hurt, and Louis was a rescue dog himself, and he just knows how to find him. And that little hand came out. The relationship started. The healing can start. So these are just some beautiful pictures, I think, of our kids. And to tell you that we've got right now 3 very sick children, 2 trisomy 13 children. And I think if we go back to the beginning of that slide and look at that beautiful, very vast land, we can continue to help these children. This baby's terminal, but we can walk this family through in a different way because we've tried to get under the problem. The problem is isolation, right? The problem is lack of resources, and we have to start with that community and start as early as possible. So we start prenatal, and it works out well. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for letting me show you a different perspective.